Hello everyone. Thank you for coming for our seminar number 4 in our flagship series, Glocal Agenda in the Arts Management Research, Interrogating, Redefining, and Challenging Traditional Research Canons. The whole idea of this research series is to bring all the excitement about all different research projects that are happening in Singapore right now and to explore them from different perspectives. So we talked about technologies in research, we brought National Arts Council in our previous seminars. Today we have a very special topic because we are talking about participatory research, research that involves practice and mostly artistic practice, and we have an amazing panel of artists who will share a lot of really exciting information, a lot of insights, how they do research by engaging in their artistic practices. So let me introduce first our moderator. This is Dr. Stephanie Burridge. She's a choreographer, performer, and dance writer and series editor for 2 Routledge anthology collections, celebrating dance in Asia and the Pacific, including books on Cambodia, India, Malaysia, Taiwan, Australia, Singapore, the South Pacific, North India, and Thailand. She edited the Routledge Companion for Dance in Asia and the Pacific, Platforms for Change, and co-authored Choreographic Basics with Jenny Roche. He recently published edited collection with the Routledge anthology Dance On, Dancing Through Life Research, right? So, and the presentation and the book launch was most recently right here at Versailles. So her research and choreographic projects have been supported by the Australian Council, Arts ACT, Singapore International Foundation, and the National Arts Council Singapore. So we are really lucky and very happy to have Stephanie with us today to manage and to moderate the whole event. She has got 3 very interesting questions for our panelists, so you will enjoy a lot. And let me right now introduce our keynote speaker, who will take the floor after I finish the introduction. So this is Dr. Amin Farid. He's a choreographer, arts educator, and researcher, and was the joint artistic director of Bloomy Collective until 2022. And he's a this is a multidisciplinary performing arts and producing company. Amin is the curator of an online portal, Arki-Gen, right, which documents maritime Southeast Asian dances. He's also the current president of a dance organization, DIAN Dancers, and the founding member of Arki-Gen, a collective focused on promoting discourse and research about Southeast Asian performing arts. He's a recipient of the Asian India Youth Award, Singapore Youth Award, National Arts Council Scholarship, and Go Chok Tong Mendaki Youth Promise Award in 2016. He has a doctorate degree in theatre, drama, and dance studies from Royal Holloway University of London. Trust me, we are super happy and lucky to have him with us today, because it's really difficult to catch him, because he's going to different international residencies just non-stop. And it was very difficult to catch him and bring him here. So, Amin, the floor is yours right now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Grateful to Dr. Soultari Amin Farid for offering me this opportunity to give a keynote on creative praxis. And I also would like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Stephanie Burridge, celebrated author and scholar, and will be moderating the panel later, and also to congratulate you on the publication of Dance On. Excited to be reading it soon. And also allow me to recognize my fellow panelists, all of whom are my esteemed friends, with trailblazing achievements. In all honesty, they deserve their own keynotes. Alas, that's not possible, so I will take it for the team today, right? And also like to say that I'm amongst friends, very happy to have faculty here present as well. Right, I'm a little nervous. I don't know why, but you know, I think as a performer, we get sometimes we get stage fright. I think you know I will warm up slowly. Now, given the artistic liberties bestowed upon me, I would like to offer my conclusion first. Okay, so this is in order to keep to the stipulated time, and also the artist in me feels quite compelled to queer the structure. Although there is okay, yeah, so my conclusion. Although there is gradual recognition of creative practice as academic work, there continues to be some hesitance. The doubt that such artistic experimentation and practice as research possess, if any, intellectual rigor has hindered creative praxis from receiving its due recognition as a method of critical analysis and discursive practice. Through my humble keynote, I have shown, I will show you later, how my many curiosities drawn from my own embodied and auto-ethnographic experiences as a mover, as a minority person in Singapore, as a Southeast Asianist, and as a nomad, have helped shape my own critique and inquiry. In addition, the role of willing collaborators in the pursuit of creative praxis has provided an arena that promotes peer review and collaborative critique for a work to possess depth and dynamism that is relevant to the communities that we work with. So that's my conclusion. Now, to the presentation proper. Okay. So what is my approach to art making? I have been Malay dancer since the late 90s, and I like to investigate Malay dance as a practice of potentialities. And what do I mean by this? Now, as I learn and conduct research, it's come clear to me that we need to approach the study of Malay dance as incomplete. Not to say that the form is incomplete, but the study of it is incomplete. And this is coming from a place of understanding how Malay stereotypes continues to be very evident in how we understand Malay culture. Looking at some of the theories and critiques given by, for example, the late Professor Syed Hussein Al-Attas, looking at the lazy natives, and also by Professor Lili Zubaida Rahim, who has spoken at length about cultural deficit theory, it seems that we are always approaching the study of Malay culture and Malay dance form through the lens of the deficit. And in actual fact, it is in abundance. So with that feeling and aspiration, I move forward with my own artistic endeavor by recognizing that actually Malay dance has abundance. And I'm also trying to encourage an acknowledgement that probably there are certain things that we have not looked at, that we have not explored, that deserves some recognition and attention. Now, through my own practice as an artist scholar, I've experimented to do this through different modalities, narratives, and of course with technology. Now the last one came very much to do with being an artist in Singapore and having to be confronted with many of these new initiatives that were pushing for arts and technology. And I have, through my own work, I've done historical research, practice-based research, and I like to work collaboratively. Right, so I'll start first with a peribahasa, or a Malay proverb, tak kenal maka tak cinta, you can't love what you don't know. So this became the philosophy in which I continue to use as I think about what else can we do with Malay dance, and what else is there that is left unexplored. I'd like to speak about one of my very early works, Intersections, Traditionally Speaking, 2017. This is a performance lecture that I co-created with my collaborator, Elizabeth Chan, who at that time was doing her PhD at NUS, looking at Chinese dance. So it was very interesting as we were before she started her PhD, we were both master's students at Roehampton University under the guidance of our late professor, Andre Gros. And we were thinking a lot about our own practice in Singapore and what does it mean to be pigeonholed under this CMIO, but yet feeling quite proud of our own practice. And how do we negotiate these contestations? And for us, it was reality seeping in and realizing that actually we've been working in silos for the longest time. If we look back at history in the 1950s and 1960s, we saw a lot more opportunity for traditional artists to collaborate because they were under the banner or the umbrella of the National Dance Company. But today we are seeing traditional arts groups working in silos. So it was through such discussions and experimentation in which we were sharing our own practice that we realized that there were similarities in the way we dance, in the way we move. And it was really interesting through collaboration and through critical discourse, because the two of us were also dealing with all these theories that we were getting via our PhD, that we needed to unpack, issues of gender, traditionality, etc. So eventually what happened was we created a performance lecture, and this performance lecture was featured, it was staged, performed at Center 42, and it was very interesting putting this together because, as dancers, we dance a lot, but this time we had to talk a lot. So it was definitely a wonderful experience thinking through collaboratively and also to initiate critical discourse through through dancing together. In 2019, I co-created Mak Mak Menari. So actually, Mak Mak Menari is not a production itself. Actually, it's a group of former Malay dancers who have become mothers and they have aged and they stopped dancing altogether, but decided to out of their own love for dance, wanted to come back to dance again. So before this premiere in 2019, they were already actively dancing. But because most of them were my sisters, right, because we were part of a community, I wanted very much to share their story. And it was very interesting to listen in, so because we conducted interviews and also for them to reflect upon why they stopped dancing for a while. And then it was also to do with the sort of taboo that was, that is very prevalent within the Malay community, in which, once you've aged and you've worn the hijab, you should behave in a certain way, and because you're a mother, you shouldn't be dancing on stage. So they were also sharing some of these issues in this work. This is actually a documentary theatre piece that I co-created with Grace Lee Koo. And we highlighted some of their stories and their voices, and also to show them that even though their practice is in Malay dance, we could work to create a theatrical piece or a performance in which they were able to share their stories vocally, not only via the medium of dance. Okay, the next proverb is hendak seribu daya, tak hendak seribu dalih. If one is willing, 1,000 things may be achieved, if not 1,000 excuses. I think this is a very interesting quote for me in particular, because this is also in reference to technology, working with technology. I think for a while it became very difficult to work with technology, probably because I think the assumption is because you're a traditional artist, you should, to work with technology might feel like, it's something surpassing what's expected. But to be honest, I think, to think about traditionality or traditional dance as something that is nostalgic and archaic doesn't seem to fit, especially when the practice is very active today and continues to be prevalent and practiced within the community. So just wanted to share shortly, briefly, some of the works that I've done with technology. So this is myself, a younger self of me, and I'm wearing this AirPod Touch, which, you know, as it is moving, it's also manipulating sounds. We acknowledge we may acknowledge the different planes that were also manipulating the different ethnic musical sounds of the rebana, of the flute, etc. And the work has evolved, and this is myself in 2021 working with lights as well, manipulating lights, and how, you know, everything, how the dancer is able to work with the many different elements and controlling it independently. Okay, and I'm supposed to stop now, but I'm just going to do last one, which is Alam Takambang Jadi Guru, Nature as Teacher. I think I wanted to connect with some of my colleagues here today who are working with nature in their creative praxis, and, you know, it's also trying to say that, you know, this is something that we've been working on for a while now, and this is myself with Australian artist called Mutiara. We were looking at the pearl diving histories of Broome in Australia, and this has been going on since the 1920s. And the work itself just premiered recently, and we were working closely with pearl divers who are still alive, and talking about their stories and how they had to move from Singapore and Malaya into Australia, and became to take on this perilous job of having to go down many fathoms and having to deal with, you know, shark infested perils, etc. So we created a dance theatre piece, and also acknowledging some of their stories that we don't hear in Australian history and Singapore, Malaysian history as well. So yes, I'm very thankful that I did my conclusion in advance, so that we can end with Mutiara. And yeah, so that's all this is all that I can offer today, and I hope you know, I've shown to the best of my ability, you know, my own creative praxis, and how my own embodied and awareness of socio-cultural and politics has helped me create these works. Thank you.
Hi everybody, it's a rush, but I think it's a chance to say, wow, let's hear some more next time, okay? So it's a taster, and that's what we're doing today. You get a taste of a lot of people's work, and it doesn't mean, you know, you won't come back again for more. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and our next speaker's got even less time, so you'll definitely have to get back to what they're doing, all right? So our next speaker is Fairul, if you'd like to come up. Fairul Zahid, Dr. Fairul is an award-winning, prolific and versatile choreographer, and he'll have to choreograph very quickly to get you 5 minutes in. Works in contemporary ballet and Malay dance, Chinese classical dance, Indian classical dance, and he is a lecturer in dance at LaSalle. His topic is Being and Doing, Sustainability of Practice into Research. Let's welcome him.
Hello, good afternoon. No, good afternoon, yes. It's very short, 5 minutes, so I hope I can perform very well in 5 minute times. So first of all, thank you so much for this wonderful session, especially Stephanie and so Dr. Natalia. And this is great, and I've not seen Amin for ages, and also not hearing any talk from Amin, and it's very lovely talk and presentation. Thank you so much. So back, I don't have a slide. I'm not like Dr. Amin, have slides and you can like pitch it, you know, like, you know, this kind of thing. But I would rather to have my process. So throughout this presentation, you guys, everyone can see what I've been trying to do for the past many years as a dancer and also choreographer. So ladies and gentlemen, so basically my research title exactly is about empowering women through the lens of matriarchy in creating contemporary dance work. And my titles of my choreography is Sopan, which is in Malay we call it Sopan, and of course in English we call it like polite. So this is very interesting because I combine it using the literature theory, which is we call it speech theory, where I combine the word and also movement. You know, why sopan is in this choreography where the costume is not really sopan, you know, it's not really polite, you know, as a Malay woman, why you wearing all this kind of thing and so on and so forth. And this is also because of, like Stephanie have mentioned about sustainability, where I try to sustainable the tradition, where the Malay traditions nowadays have been like gone, slowly disappear. So I'm trying to merge with the current situation, which is the present, which is contemporary, and bringing both traditionals and also contemporary into my practice. And this is also very important for people to know about what is exactly the culture, what is exactly about women in Malaysia, particularly in Rembau Negeri Sembilan, one of the state in Malaysia, where they are, I can say, practice the adat pepatih, or I can say usual behavior. The adat pepatih, I cannot find what is in English, you know, but it's normally they say usual behavior or traditions that they have been practiced. Where when you married with a man, for example, all the wealth, money and everything have to go to the woman. So when you get divorced, for example, you get everything. So this is also very important to be shown or to shown to the public, not only in particular in Malaysia, but across the region. So that's why I bring this kind of concept into my choreography also at the same time. Another thing is because also people keep marginalized women, especially in dance. Like for example, in terms of movement. One of the reasons I bring this choreography or this research is also because one of my teacher and also my mentor, which is Joseph Gonzalez, always said, Fairul, why you always working with men's? Okay, and all the movement are very athletic, and it's very hard for women to adapt and to follow my style and so on and so forth. So I took that challenge and try to give to the students, I mean to the dancers, which is woman itself. And I believe, like especially I doing this research while I'm in LaSalle, and I believe the dancers in LaSalle, especially women, the girls, can portray and can adapt with all the athletics movement very well. And that's why I come up with this research about women's. And it's very happens that my culture also very similar, which is in Malaysia we practice all this kind and respect the women's very well and so on and so forth. And of course I come up with a lot of another reason. Let me see. Okay, so basically this choreography process went through a lot of version, which is I couldn't find a way to say woman empowering woman that wasn't cheesy until I thought of the idea of matriarchy. And why is the word patriarchy so easy on our tongue? You know, and then why aren't we talking about our matriarchy? The more we talk about what it's mean to have your voice heard, the more they realize that woman empowering woman really look like. It was highlighting where it was good in their life, but also showed them where it could be better. Consider the similarities between the elements of religion and culture described in this chapter, such as the role of symbols and stories in both accounts, and the pursuit of life according to what either faith or culture determines to be the highest standards of living. So as you can see, just now is my final outcome, where the outcome of my research, I have demonstrated and they are winning for Yokohama Dance Collection, which is in Japan. So I think the outcome and this research are very thoroughly well described, I think. With that, ladies and gentlemen, that's why I have a video, and the video is 5 minutes. With that, thank you so much.
Okay, it's another fabulous practice that we'll have to look into further, and we're lucky that Fairul is here at the Salle, so we'll be able to pop down to the studio maybe and have a look at the dancers working with him sometime, which will be great. Okay, so and thank you for keeping to time, that's great. Zarina is next. Zarina Muhammad is an artist, educator and researcher whose practice is deeply entwined with a critical re-examination of oral histories, ethnographic literature and other historiographic accounts about Southeast Asia. So let's welcome Zarina with her topic, Moving Earth, Crossing Water Moderator, Restless Topographies, lessons on threshold crossing and wayfinding alongside non-human collaborators.
Thanks so much. Thank you. So firstly, thank you so much for this kind invitation and for having me. I'm just going to jump right into it. I'm probably going to sound like I'm rapping, but let's go. Okay, so today I'll be sharing, as the title of my presentation suggests, reflections, tangential points, and lessons from a long-term and ongoing collaborative research project looking into environmental ecocultural histories, and really thinking about our more than human, multi-dimensional, multi-species understanding of our place in the world. I'm particularly interested in the sites that have resisted and perhaps disobeyed the developmentalist logic of extractive capitalism. This project so far has been led by the subterranean and watery radial modes of traversing the seen and unseen, alongside pathways created by migratory flows of bodies, flows of goods, capital, flows of the immaterial, spectral, and speculative. So through this work, this is all time being wasted. My collaborators and I meander, we walk and talk. We explore cityscapes and really think about these questions of territoriality, place histories, water bodies, lands scarred by imperial projects, past and present. We think about spiritual landscapes that thrive in spite of urban redevelopment. We walk around and through infrastructures overlaid on spirit paths and are attentive to architectural and urban interventions via the survival and creation of wayside shrines. We witness and hold with care apotropaic acts, beliefs, and rituals associated with itinerancy, inhabitation, and ways of engaging with the landscape's potency. We explore embodied memory as archive, and we think of mapping not just from the sky downwards, but as an act that requires us to observe the unobservable. We reorient our senses to pay attention to the texture of soil, sand, and sediment, to be attentive to the smooth, uneven, or jagged edges where water meets land, to pay attention to the pathways, the desire paths, the fence barricaded, obstructed pathways that still bear the legible marks of the imprints of bodies, beings, and machines. Across these unruly, unsettled geographies, we are led by questions on ways to be attentive and attune oneself to the porosity of space, to the liquidity of terror, and territory. We think of water, where dredging has occurred, the smothered, suffocating, wide, wavy, aerial, or tube-like roots, which mangrove trees use for breathing. We think of riverbed incisions, water bodies sliced in half by infrastructure, or unlit by algae blooms, sites where deoxygenation is a consequence and water becomes unbreathable. We revisit the past lives of the many river mouths that have been sealed shut or made concrete due to land development. In each place we walk, we try to locate the oldest tree. We think of their root systems held by soil. And across the archipelago, there is a belief that one must touch soil with their lips in order for the land to recognize you. A mutual acknowledgement that land, a living, shape-shifting creature of deep time, is ungovernable and resists modern concepts of sovereignty. So what pragmatic prayers are uttered when we're moving earth, crossing water, eating soil to inhabit a new place? How attentive are we to the elusive, unseen bodies, beings, organisms, ungovernable, I love that word, worlds inhabiting these sites? And I think we do need to pay attention to the deep local that we might have taken for granted. To think of the artist as a bridge, and think about these other archetypal energies and signatures that each can embody. The bridge, the carrier bag, the vessel, the tempayan, the fermentation jar. With the slow unfolding of various iterations of this work, I spent a lot of time thinking about various modes of wayfinding, polysensoriality, and navigating through different realms of knowledges. I want to pay attention to wisdoms and lessons that we can humbly learn from non-human animals and the places that we inhabit, pass through, and take up space in. There's also another belief across island Southeast Asia that the auspiciousness of a location is determined by the color, the taste, the smell of soil, the evident appearance of life-sustaining, tart-tasting, fragrance-scented soil horizons. So I say that any space that we occupy will inevitably be a site brimming with layers and layers of histories, bearing imprints of violence, legacies of trauma, survival, thriving life across human, non-human, and more than human worlds. So I've often described my practice and way of thinking, approaching the world and its relational entanglements like a multi-headed hydra. It's really who I am. Can't see it yet, so there. Because I really enjoy the polyphony of multiple interpretations, the vexations of translations, mistranslations, the impossibility of translations, especially in working collaboratively across different realms, modes, mediums, with human and non-human co-authors. Much of my work, my process underpinning my work is led by being, attuning oneself to space by instinct, intuition, and chance, and it is always collaborative. And I always feel it's extremely important to extend gratitude and acknowledge all non-human, creaturely companion species guides and guardians of spirit paths as co-authors, who offer lessons and whom we are learning together to circumnavigate, accommodate, and redraw new thresholds in these often quiet entanglements. In the course of my ongoing work, I'm also continually reminded of the gentle nudging of the words of the anthropologist Anna Singh, who writes, "Research categories develop with the research, not before it." So anthropology, ethnographic approaches, art, everything that we do in our creative practice should always be seen as an always in process collaboration. So through this work, I asked what dispensations and modes of living are we unlearning, retracing, encountering when we allow our senses to be fully attentive to the microorganisms, the seasonal rhythms of the landscape, the changing direction of winds, to life forms that cannot be governed. What are the ways of being, looking, and leaning in that allows us to give sight and presence to be unobservable, to our own animality, to our own gentle ferocities? What might we witness, and what is animated when we situate ourselves in places that ask for your whole body to listen? How can we locate the breath in the quiet pauses within the feral body and spaces of multi-species cohabitation? And what lessons may be drawn by lines plotted by animal navigation, stone formations, earth mounds, trickster tides, submerged reefs, maritime arteries, lightlessness, and unseen worlds that possess their own momentum and relationship with time? Okay, do I have 1 minute? I will just end with this 30-second thing. I feel like these are questions that I always ask myself when I set up my work, my installations in any space, and these are questions I feel like we always need to ask ourselves when we're sharing space. What is the name of the place you're standing on now? What does it mean? How did they come to possess their name? What other place names, topographical names, local non-Anglophone names might this site possess? Who speaks the language of these names? How has this site's identity been violently reshaped when it was renamed at any point in history? Can you say the names see, hear, smell, sense, all the migratory flows of bodies and beings who have resided, occupied, moved through, been displaced, rehomed, segregated, isolated, undocumented, celebrated, shamed, desired, feared, revered, rerouted, uprooted, forgotten in this exact spot where you stand? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think there's so many wonderful concepts there and so many words that are very hard to catch. And yeah, it's right, it's like a rap, you know. But I might add that this shorter format is one that's very commonly used in research now. So it's not unusual to have this information coming out quite quickly. So again, let's have a longer one next time. Okay, we'll keep moving on to introduce Shireen Marican, who's a cultural manager, systems thinker, and educator, motivated to advance engagement of culture with people, institutions, and organizations for a just and equitable environment and society. So her topic is nature as a stakeholder in participatory research. Okay, Shireen, thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and also thank you to the Arts Management, all the faculty members for the opportunity. So my topic today is actually scoped down so that I can keep to the 5 minutes that we all have, and really focusing on the part about embedding ecological futures and thinking for artistic and cultural research. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a cultural worker with an academic background in arts management, then museum studies and curatorial practice, systems thinker and initiator, enacted through my role with Desire Lines to help organizations in transition towards future-focused mindset and also an adjunct lecturer. So to start with, I start by thinking about ecological thinking and what it really means. And it's really about thinking in ecosystems. And it has to do with the way we imagine ourselves co-evolving with nature and how living systems in a particular location connect, conspire, and collaborate with one another. It also actually forces us to accept an expanded notion of what makes a community, the interconnectivity of living systems, and most importantly, the multifaceted nature of what is defined as a cultural locale. A futures thinking perspective, however, helps you to think about leveraging upon ecosystem dynamics that unfold into the future while examining the past. Living systems continue to have a strategic and existential fit when faced with uncertainties of the future, when thinking and planning exist over a much broadened time horizon. So a futures thinking ecological perspective actually assesses a very broad range of ecological futures or possible ecosystem states in order to inform decision making that benefits all living systems and considers the decline of biodiversity, It also considers ecological change, as well as the larger social issues that have stemmed from or resulted in some of these ever-evolving circumstances of the world or our planet today. And I explore these ecological domains through a Desire Lines project called DUN, which is a restored habitat about 30 minutes away from Jaipur in India, which is owned by a developer group, but also ambitions to be a sustainable, self-sufficient creative district in the future on a 500-acre bioreserve. So the size of that particular land would fit about 8,500 people. And it is conceived as a working, a learning and recreational space that considers the need of the local ecology, the community, as well as the individuals. It also explores ways in which traditional living systems can actually live into the future. Dun was a deserted land, and it was restored over a period of time by that particular developer, but is now home to a thriving species of migration of birds and all other living species as well, and flourishing flora and fauna. So aside from its ecological restoration, Dun has also achieved the first stage of development of a makerspace, a learning hub, as well as farm-to-table approaches. But it's very much in the process of becoming, and it's a project in development, which is exactly the type of projects that we want to work with, because transformation potential, as we've seen, is highest at that stage. As part of our work to advise on organization governance and also community building, we created frames of inquiry, which basically we felt were necessary for research to fulfill the objectives that you see here. And the objectives are mainly to attract creative professionals and communities across disciplines, have intergenerational knowledge transfers through different mediums, and also lastly for the preservation of cultural heritage of Jaipur and Dun. And with these objectives, what was built up from that whole process of ecological questioning is also finding through lines in which all the different ecological questions that we had previously started to link together, because it has transformative and innovative potential. And one of the examples, very quickly, the deep research into the population demographics, which yielded the insight that there was a particularly aging population that were also built upon artisans or artistry, as well as craftspeopleship. And what that also meant was it helped us shape the thinking around creating ergonomic innovation to support the elderly artisans, which meant creating furniture that supported their work, but in a way that also doesn't impede on their health for the future. And another example that we also have is looking at the abiotic and biotic interactions within living systems in the space. Biotic relations means relations between living species, and abiotic relations means relationships between non-living species. And what that yielded was insight into naturalistic intelligence, which were then fed into the curriculum to the learning space, which also then helped to continually create a continuous loop of innovation for ergonomic practices. So everything around the ecosystem started to have a relationship with one another. So what this really means is that, or what it's trying to show is that the innovative and transformative potential that ecological thinking can imbue in your project actualizes your objectives. So every 3 or 4 of these circles can create one ecological state in itself. And that also means that embedding this sort of thinking into our research can also elevate the regenerative potential of the project, its impact to the community, and provides opportunities for more localized practice for cultural and creative practitioners to engage with. And transposing this into art and cultural practice actually implies that we're making a more conscious effort to contemplate how work and our research can connect to broader communities and living systems. And this also provides us the opportunity for our practice to be more regenerative and face the uncertain future with confidence. Thank you.
Okay, it's another fabulous paper to think about and connect perhaps with some of the other work that we've been listening to today. I'd like to invite the panelists, the speakers, to come out, and we'll form a panel here, and we're going to have a bit of a discussion. I've formulated 3 questions, and we'll they have them in advance. And again, we've got a bit of a time issue, I'm afraid. So hopefully we'll get through them and we'll see how we go. Tali, you want to? Right? Okay. So. And I think that the first one is very, very current in terms of many of us now are doing practice-based degrees, practice-based research, artist-led research, artist immersive research. And I'm very interested in looking at the embodied subjectivity of the artist when they're doing research vis-a-vis an objective lens. How do you, there's a spectrum between those things. So it really comes down, almost could be a methodology idea to deal with. So we'll just, we'll go through, it doesn't matter if everybody doesn't answer each question, but so would somebody like to, maybe the guys, seeing you're very involved with research and practice, so maybe one of you could begin with that one. Thank you.
Oh, I need to press. Hi. Okay. Right. Okay. I find it still very difficult to create work thinking or to create work or to do research objectively, especially since I'm a proponent of autoethnography and also acknowledging the positionality of the researcher, and also because the communities that I work with are communities that I identify with, and I think my agreement towards autoethnography also comes from acknowledging how that method itself has evolved and exists, because it is trying to do away with the singular narrative of the white person. So it felt even more important for me to constantly reflect upon myself and acknowledge that a lot of the things I see is subjective. It's also via a lens of my own cultural capital, to acknowledge the privileges that has been afforded upon me, and to be critical of it, yet also not shy away from doing the research itself or to create the work itself.
Okay, thank you. Fairul, I'm interested in your opinion because you're actually looking at women in dance, and so what would you like to add on to that?
But I mean, it's very interesting when Amin's talk about the agreements and the methodology or something like that. Like for example, for me as a practitioner, I'm trying to serve in both parties. Like for example, as a practitioner or choreographer, I have to make a piece for a certain or particular audience who are interested into movement and dance and so on and so forth. And another thing is I have to serve for people in the academic sector or area or something like that. So in order for me to serve in both, so that's how I come up with those kind of research, and come up with from the practice that I have into a research where I can serve with both. And also it's very interesting if I don't focus on something that's already marginalized, who going to focus on them? So that's why I'm trying to bring up the marginalized. Who knows, maybe in the future they can be a mainstream. It's not impossible, because nowadays also we can see the marginalized can be in the mainstream while they are on the TV shows and so on and so forth, so you can dance, world of dance or something like that, bringing contemporary, where the olden days contemporary is not the mainstream, but now it's already in mainstream. So one day, if this kind of issue like matriarchy kind of thing can bring into a mainstream and people can see this is very important, why not? So that's why, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Zarina, I'm very interested in your comment on this because you're going into quite a spiritual realm. So yeah, so what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think when okay, yeah, I think when I was just thinking about your question, the first thing I thought of was authorship, and also the questions. For me, with this subject matter, I'm very, very cautious and aware of, again, my position of privilege, or also being really self-reflexive with the subject matter, being attentive also to the inevitable blind spots that we all have, even if we have the best intentions and acknowledging it. And I feel like when it comes to objectivity, I'm a little bit wary of that as well, because I feel that with embodied work and research, it's very sensorial, it's very visceral, it's something that we experience directly, and it's sometimes necessary, at least for me, that these binaries need to be dismantled. Where, at least with the work that I do, I really enjoy the polyphony of destabilizing these categories, these binaries, and inviting almost this discordant sort of like multi-vocal, multi-dimensional sort of spaces. Answering your question, what else?
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in the point we have to bring in academia, and I'm sure all the people that have done research and PhDs, but there's a point where you have to start citing a lot of other people's work. So you start saying, this is my work, and then you've got, your references, your sources, all the things that come in. So it's that interplay between those two things, which I suppose I'm interested in how people are dealing with that, and it's sort of part of our world right now. I don't know if that will change or it's something we can disrupt, but it's interesting. So Shireen, would you like to comment any more about this topic?
I was going to mention about the binaries as well, but also I think what came up from the conversations as well is thinking about recognizing your bias, understanding your position, your positionality, your bias, and then at the same time not thinking in binaries when we're thinking about matriarchy or patriarchy as well. So that was along the lines of what Zarina wanted to mention, but I'm happy to move on.
Okay. All right then. Okay. So I think this is a very interesting thing for artists to be constantly looking at, and with pedagogy as well. The first thing we're saying to the students, okay, what's your source? What have you read? What have you done? So and how you choose those things, and who decides what choice that you make. And we probably advise our students to some of the sources we've used, I don't know. So there's a perpetuating hierarchy in a way as well. So I think some of these things are things we can think about, how that hierarchy works.
But what if we dismantle that hierarchy? What if we question it, subvert it? Must it still exist? Because I feel like with a lot of the work that I do, it resists that consciously, unconsciously. I work with it. I sometimes feel it as a stumbling block. But I also dwell in the discomfort. And for me, how do we sort of transmute and convert that or shift that discomfort of needing to cite my sources or needing to have that badge of academia? So I feel these are big questions that I think all disciplines need to really think about very closely.
Yeah, I think, okay, so I think if we've got time at the end, we'll have some Q&A and with the audience, and maybe some people have got some thoughts on that, which is interesting. So I wanted to go to my next question, which is really about decolonizing artistic practice. And I'm interested in where people pick the point to start. Like a lot of people say, oh, I'm decolonizing this. So, how far back do you go? Who decides where you begin? Is it a historical point, a political point, a social point, a religious point, where certain groups took over another group? So I'm from Australia. So in Australia we have this point of where the first fleet arrived to Australia. But then, we go back, we say the indigenous culture went back to 60,000 years. So we're really going from 200 years ago or more to 60,000, and there's a massive amount of time there. So it's obviously not one homogeneous block. So this sort of investigation and layering and archival sort of relics and how you use those and the layering, the palimpsest as you go through. How do we choose where we're starting our decolonization? Would anyone like to comment on that? It's a very big question, I know.
For me, I don't really see decolonization as an act of, or I don't see it in the lens of temporality. I don't look at it as time. I'm also looking at acknowledging that certain colonial mentalities we have been embedded with it, and how we call it out, how we learn to acknowledge that these colonial mentalities have stopped us from acknowledging the diversity of ontologies, the diversity of ideas, of practice that's present in the world, that the way we live and work is not only Europe, it's also acknowledging that Southeast Asia is rich and vast with practices that continues to exist and live and breathe, and that there's so much there to look at and unpack. And I think I've done that somewhat, with interspersing it with peribahasa. A lot of times, I think the proverbs that exist, we see it just as words, but in itself, it speaks about the culture. It speaks about, there's advice. There's also cautionary tales. So these are things which we should regard as knowledge that should be incorporated into our own practice and ideas. So this is just my take.
Can I add on to that? Yeah, because I agree with everything that you're saying, and I mean, I feel with my work, I'm looking also at the non-human, the unseen world. And when I'm talking about the unseen world, it's not just spirits. I mean, I love my ghosts, but it's really also thinking about how we are imagining these. I mean, the question I always ask myself is, can ghosts and gods die? And I say yes, because once we stop speaking their name, we stop and making images of them, we forget them. So and what lessons? That's why I feel like with the work that I'm doing, I'm always asking myself, what lessons am I receiving or am I gleaning from these other than non-human worlds, like the animals that pass through, the microorganisms, the germs that are in the air right now. Basically the microfauna. I think that's been something I'm really interested in.
Okay, well, just so we've got a bit of time if anyone wants to ask something, but I just want to ask Shireen about this idea of mutating. I've called it mutating ecologies, and as artists we often respond to nature. We respond to things. I'm wondering if we can work the other way, which seems to be what you're starting to do. You're starting to say, well, it should be the other way around. So you're doing that in your work. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that. So can the nature be a catalyst for change? Can it be a change-making thing in itself if we position that differently? So would you like to talk a bit about that?
Of course, and I think one point that you mentioned about response, I guess it has to be a two-way dialogue rather than you reacting to a circumstance, because that reinforces the fact that it doesn't become transformative in a way. But for you to have that dialogue within different ecologies that are within your ecosystem and creating different ecological states with all the different things that you see within your natural environment, then you are having a conversation in which everyone gets invited into that conversation, whether unseen, seen, or even those that don't have the voice to talk, to speak up for themselves. That is nature. So with that, I think in terms of catalyst of change, everything that you do in terms of research or ecological research, if that doesn't translate into innovative action, then there is no change. So developing or deepening your research from the information that you get around nature, but seeing how that can fit into your practice, that's when the change happens. And transformative potential is scaled when you recognize the relationship between different ecological states that are happening within your environment. If you look at them in silo, which is something that you mentioned, Amin mentioned about when you work in silo and you look at different ecologies as being a practice in itself, quite like the CMIO framework, then you don't see the transformative potential, you don't see the change. So it's recognizing it has to work in collaboration with one another, it has to conspire with one another, and ultimately you have an action that comes out from it.
Okay, well, I think that's great, and I think the magic word we've missed is methodology in a lot of this, so I'm sure if we went through each speaker that we'd find ways that they do that. How do you do it? How do you map it? How do you observe? Do you record? How do you do your stuff? So, but I think that's something that for another time. I think we've got 5 minutes left, have we? So if anyone in the audience would like to ask one of the panelists a question, we've got a few minutes left. Anybody like to ask something?
Hi, sorry, I don't think I need the mic. Is okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Yeah, thank you so much to the panelists for all your great presentations. I really like that we got to hear such a broad scope of issues, from very human-specific ones to things like social identities like gender and race, as well as like more human-adjacent issues like the environment, etc., etc. So I'm just wondering, have you noticed any really interesting overlaps or chasms between your work and your research and another presenter that you've heard today? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Yes, I think there's a deep common thread between all of ours in terms of who we are inviting into our discussion and research. There is an addition, like the dimensions of how we are presenting is always about addition rather than subtraction, rather than making it more exclusive. It's always about who can we add into this discussion, which is, I think, a huge thing in participatory research. And I think that is a common thread that I've seen in all the presentation today.
And also like me, for example, right, like I'm a man, and I'm a man. I'm talking about women, you know, I'm talking about things that I'm not comfortable with. It's very amics in terms of ethics, very ethics in terms of amics or something like that. So even though it's my culture, but it's not really into it. And sometimes, like for example, if I present it among all the Malaysian or the Malay community already comfortable with that culture, say they may and might against me also, where actually it's happened before. So I have to explain, and I had explained to them like in details. So like being in the culture, like for example in anthropology or ethnography, for example, you have to be in it. You have to really understand their culture. You have to be like literally lower down yourself when you being in that culture. Like for example, in qualitative, you have to interview that particular culture and so on and so forth. You really have to lower it down. Where I cannot say that I'm trying to be a woman to create a choreography. I cannot say that. But I have to understand what women's feelings. And luckily, like for example, I'm working with a lot of women and, you know, talking with my stepmoms and moms and sisters and something like that. So in a way, they give me some like ideas what women are, and living in a society that, I mean, well, basically my leader itself, you know, my neighbor is woman, Nora. I mean, neighbor in my office lah, basically, you know, and then Leela and something like that. So it's very interesting. So basically it's like that.
Okay, I'd like to really thank all our panelists, and it's been a wonderful session. So thank you all very much for joining in the discussion, and I think Natalia's going to wrap up for us.
Thank you very much, everyone, and I really loved Amin's sayings or Malay poems, right? So the one that really right now in my heart, you cannot love anything that you do not know. After this session, I feel I love you all so much more, because I know better what you are doing, I understand better what you are doing, and I'm fascinated with all these research projects that are going on that are so deep, that are so exciting, and that bring so much new knowledge for us to enjoy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, our guest speaker, our keynote speaker. Thank you, Stephanie, for wonderful moderation, and all the panels today. And thank you for our audiences. We'll see you next Friday, where we continue talking about the decolonization of arts management research. Thank you.